Hey, everybody, welcome back. I am here today with Jay Slater, the current magazine cover model for USPSA, sporting that cool Ruger. Jay has been kind enough to help me out kind of with what we started with Alex, trying to kind of establish a bit of a knowledge base for revolver shooters, new revolver shooters, people who are interested in it, and trying to figure out where to go. And Jay's kind of unique in that he's been representing the Rugers for some time. So, Jay, if you don't mind, would you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you've been up to in the revolver world.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jay Slater. As JD said, I've was a little surprised to find myself on the cover of USPSA magazine this last month. I've been shooting revolver now since 2020. It was kind of my COVID pickup, I guess, something that I thought I'd try. Was something that I knew I'd probably like and hadn't really had the opportunity to try until about that early 2020 thing. There's a good story about that we can come back to later, actually, about division choices and such. So I kind of shot it with increasing seriousness over the couple of years following that. It was my wife who told me that I should get more into it, which is kind of the inverse of the usual.
You lucky dog.
Yeah. No, so she has a history of competition herself, and she said, you could be good at this. Like, put some effort into it. See where it goes. And so I did. And over the 4 years since, I think I made it to USPSA Revolver Grandmaster at the beginning of 2023, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, and that's kind of the path I've taken, I guess, to get here so far.
So when did you start competitive shooting?
That was about 2016 or 2017. I shot a couple of 2-gun matches in 2016 or so, then got into USPSA in 2017 and sort of made my way through faster and faster divisions before I eventually found my way back to revolver. So I started shooting in production like a lot of people did in the mid 2010s. I put a 40 slide. I had a 40 caliber CZ P09, which was kind of maybe an odd choice for limited, but it worked out okay for me. And then that turned into a carry optics gun in 2019. And then from there, I went all the way to the far end of the spectrum in revolver.
No, I hear you. Yeah, revolver was a COVID thing for me too. There was a deal. I want to say it might have been Cabela's. I think it was Cabela's, but somebody, I got an email for a Smith & Wesson sale, and it was in the middle of COVID, and I had to go up there, and they would only let customers in one at a time. Got my revolver, didn't hardly shoot it for the first year. So, I'm with you on that. That's interesting. But so what would you say your second division is now? If revolver's obviously your primary.
I don't think I really have one.
Okay. I like that.
Every now and then I'll mess around with something else, but I don't really put any effort into anything besides revolver as far as practice or. I shoot. I have a Beretta 92X that I put all of the JJ tested open parts onto, and
sure,
I shoot that now and then. But the effort there is I'll pick it up the night before the match and draw a couple of times, and then I'll call it good to go.
Yeah. Well, how about that? So what was it about revolver that made you stick with it then? Was it that you were seeing early success, or what was it?
It was actually kind of, I definitely didn't see success immediately in revolver. I kind of started out in that C to B class region. I didn't know if I was going to get much further than that. There was a conversation I had with a friend of mine in mid to late 2020, thinking I don't know if I'm ever going to get below 4 seconds on a 4 aces. And now that's a drill that I can do much, much faster than that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next big question would be what really got you into Ruger? Because I've been going to, I started about the same time you did, a little later, I think. And I see Smith & Wessons at everywhere all the time, every competition. I can probably count across the 4 regionals and everything else, probably count on my hands the number of Rugers that I've seen in matches, which is kind of a shame. I really like the Ruger aesthetic. What was it that drew you to the Ruger? Is that what you started with?
Yeah, so I am a a bit of a gun hipster, I guess. Like I don't
Okay,
like
I
shooting
like
what
that.
everyone else is shooting. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why I found my way to revolver in the first place. You know, like it's kind of a rarely shot thing, and that appealed to me. And so in 2018 or so, I was thinking like maybe I'll turn this PO9, this CZPO9, this limited CZPO9, which is already kind of the same thing as a in terms of something that nobody shoots. Maybe I'll turn that into a carry optics, or maybe I'll buy a revolver. But if I buy a revolver, I'd have to buy a Smith and Wesson. That's what everyone shoots, and I don't want to shoot what everyone shoots. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where it started. I think the platform's got some nifty features that make it easier to shoot in a couple of ways. At least easier to reload. I like the cylinder opening mechanism on the Ruger a lot more than the ones on the Smiths.
Okay. What other features do you think really made the Ruger stand out to you?
Well, at the beginning, it was literally just the hipster thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I mean, I think they clean up nearly as nicely as Smiths do in terms of trigger. I think they might even do better than they do now if there are more people who worked on them. But some of that is down to the fact that Ruger made about 200 of the 9 millimeter Super GP100s, and then just stopped. So
Yeah. Interesting. Hmm. I was
yeah.
actually at the South Regional this past weekend, and there was a gentleman there who left-handed shooter, and he was trying to sell one that he had bought and tried to make it work left-handed, and just couldn't seem to.
Hmm.
It just didn't agree with him, and so
Yeah.
I enjoyed shooting it. It's kind of a shame because, I mean, right now Smith and Wesson is pretty much the game for 8-shot revolvers. And I know there's a much rumored Taurus option that's coming out that should be, I mean, if that's everything that we hear it is, that should be really cool and a great starting point for anybody
Yeah.
looking to get into revolver. Ruger, I know they're still making, at least is listed on the website, is the 357 model is still 8 shots listed, but otherwise it's Smith. So it's really cool to see. I like the Ruger aesthetic too.
Yeah. I
They
think
they
they're
look
cool
good.
looking guns for sure.
Yeah, and they look different, you know.
Yeah.
And then when I shot the one I shot, nothing had been done to it. I think the grip angle was a little bit different than the Smith. Not bad, different, like
Yeah.
noticeably different. And the trigger I felt like had a lot of potential. It felt long in a way, but
Hmm.
almost easier to stage. And now, granted, I'm saying all this off of like 3 moon clips, right? So I didn't I didn't go shoot a match with it, but it's kind of a shame because I would love to see more more competition in there, and I'd like to see. I say I'd like to see. I've seen what you've done with the Ruger and how you've made that work. Um, so yeah, I know when I saw your scores coming out of the IRC, was it last year you went to IRC or was it last year
That
and
was
the year before? I
so
think
I
it's
think
last
I
year.
made it to the IRC 2022.
Is that what it was? Okay.
I don't think I made it last year,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
last year was Colorado. Yeah, that's when I was
Yeah.
like, man, that like any complaints because you came in, was it second in limited, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and then for a first, was it your first ICOR match or had you done some others?
I think that actually was my first ICOR match.
That's crazy to me. Like, I, I, I mean, just to show up and get second limited. I was actually talking to somebody else because we were talking about Rugers at the Rocky Mountain, which I think is what this shirt. Yeah, this is from the Rocky
Oh yeah.
Mountain Regional, the match we're talking about. But I was talking with somebody about the Rugers there, and he shot against you in the shoot off apparently, and he's
Mm.
like, and apparently your reloads just smoked everybody. Um,
Yeah, I was. They were on fire that day, and I think again some of that's down to the fact that the Ruger cylinder is really easy to open.
okay, see, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good to know. A little tip there.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that was what everybody was saying. Like, oh, you should see this guy. You should see him reload. So it's kind of fun that we're talking now. But
Yeah.
okay, so in what have you done? I guess there's no ICOR clubs around you, is there?
The closest ICOR match to me is about 3.5 or 4 hours, I think.
Yeah, that's problematic.
It is. It's strange too because like I'm kind of in the middle of like an ICOR desert, I guess, because
Yeah,
there are matches about 4 hours away in almost every direction. Just there's not one here. And
yeah.
the club I'm at, the monthly USPSA match is already about as much as the volunteers want to do. So
No, I know exactly. I know exactly what you mean. When I started ICOR, There were no clubs. The closest one was Phoenix, which for me was like, 5, 6 hour drive.
Mhm.
And that's just not going to happen. And
Yeah.
I think there's a little one in Texas. Again, that's not going to happen. It's just not feasible, especially to try something out. So I just started a club, and I wasn't working any other matches. I didn't have any other responsibilities to range. So it worked for me to have my little I-Core club. And, now we've got a really nice, like solid core group, works out well. But I know when I was talking to Alex, and it seems to be kind of a common theme, a lot of a lot of people that are shooting revolver, it seems like they're also volunteering a lot. Do you run anything out there besides your own little practice sessions?
Yeah. So I'm the match director for one of the USPSA matches around Pittsburgh. So
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. So do you think how does that affect your training, or does it?
well, the nice thing about having a match to run is that if there's anything in particular that I see is like a place I can make up some ground on people, I can just set that up at every match, and then
Okay.
not only do I see it in practice, I get to see it in match conditions too.
Nice. Okay. That's definitely advantageous in that way. I know
Hmm.
Alex talked about he's running like Steel Challenge and USPSA and all kinds of different things out there. And I mean, my I-Core match, I don't know, it's tough to so I RO'd this last weekend at the South Regional. Really enjoyed it. Probably one of the best squads I've ever shot with. But man, it is hard to focus as a competitor when you're working all these different things. But I guess if you're
Absolutely.
just doing that one deal and you can kind of set it up, kind of know what you're getting into, that could be advantageous. I like it.
Yeah, it's a nice, a relatively limited time commitment, I guess. There's the Thursday night setup ahead of the match on Saturday, and then that's only once a month. And then there's a Thursday now and then to fix props and such. But I can also, when I'm up doing that, I can set up a little stage and work on some skill there at the same time.
Like perfect your hand at a swinger, drop turn, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I
It's
mean
pretty nice to have access to those kind of things because they can be make or
Mhm.
break on some stages.
Exactly. And so it's the advantage of running a match is that you don't need to have your own swinger. You don't need to have your own drop turner because I can just say I'll pull the clubbing out. I'm testing props.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little testing this weekend. No, I like that. That's great. Man. So I've started shooting my TRR8 again this year, and I shoot it in I-Core Open. And I've been running, and I know this is like taboo, but I've been running just factory ammo through it. And I was curious as I was shooting that Ruger, is that one of those revolvers where you have to have the right primers, or is that thing eating factory ammo, or is it so modified now it will? Where are you at with your Ruger?
So at the moment, I am in the modified to the point where it takes the special hand loads.
Uh huh.
When I started, so I've got actually four of them now, four Super GP100s, which might make me like the biggest collector outside of
You have more
outside of
than
Ruger the company.
you have more
Yeah,
than Ruger. Yeah.
yeah. At this point, yeah. So the I've got two in 357 and then two of the nines.
Nice.
The 357 is still relatively stock, and those will do like factory 38 without too much trouble.
Cool.
You might need to go up to I've got a 9 or a 10 pound hammer spring in those, like up to 11 or 12. That'll probably start setting off factory stuff pretty trustworthily.
How about that? What other moon clips? I think are the same as the 929, right?
Yeah.
What about grips? Is anybody making grips besides Ruger? Are you getting
Oh
your
yeah,
own
Hope's got
made?
a. So the nice thing about the Super GPs is that they're almost like a parts bin gun. If you look at
Okay.
the diagram, so it's all the fire control group stuff. That's all out of the Super Red Hawk, which is kind of like the taller GP100 stuff, so like a taller pawl and a taller hammer and such.
Okay.
So like the grip is the same across like the entire full size Ruger family. So like it takes just your average GP100 or Super Red Hawk grips. The
That's
sight.
gonna be
This is the sights. The front sights maybe the best part of all this. Talking to Team Ruger's Dave Lasso at the last East Coast Regional, I think it might have been the last Area 8. We shot together at some match not too long ago, and he pointed out that the dovetail is just like a standard Novak dovetail, so you can go to Dawson and
wow.
just order like one of their stock options to change your front sight.
That's super convenient. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very cool.
it's fun. Actually, the Dawson one, it actually fit in the dovetail better than the factory front sight did. It was a really easy installation. So
Excellent. Nice, man. Yeah, no, that's definitely an advantage. I think with the Smiths, I've got the pinned one. There's the DX, and then there's the dovetail, and then there's like some other type of dovetail. So I've got like a whole little bin of take on offs and try ons for other sites. So that's definitely pretty convenient. Okay, so you've been winning some big matches lately. I know IPSC Nationals was what, like a month ago now.
I
Um,
guess, yeah.
yeah, pretty big win there. I actually don't know squat about IPSC, and I'm hoping you'll give us a little bit of a talk on it, because I had been saying, and I've been going around the circles going, man, they need to let optics into USPSA Revo. Man, oh, we might get more shooters. And then you brought up a good point. And I don't remember if it was in a comment on something or if it was in our little chat group we got going for only the coolest of Wheelie Boys. But but you mentioned that IPSC still requires iron sights, and until that changes, we shouldn't change it in USPSA. Not something I was aware of. Would you mind telling us a little bit about IPSC and why you've been pursuing that? Because you've done two IPSCs this year, two IPSC matches. Is
So
that right?
there was the 2023 IPSC Nationals. That was the end of last year, and then the 2024 one was the beginning of this year. So it's two almost right next to
Okay,
each other. Yeah. So I guess as far as the sport, it's sort of it's the international sanctioning body that USPSA kind of technically belongs to, although we don't take it super seriously in the US just because like we're such a big country ourselves. We can sort of do what we want. As
sure.
far as like differences go, though, like the big one is like you only get the octagon targets in IPSC, and you have to color inside the lines, like no running outside of the shooting area, um, and then some other smaller ones. So those are the two biggest differences. Like you'd notice just walking up to a match and shooting it.
Mhm.
But like so, I kind of like the idea that there's an international sport around
Sure.
this whole thing. As like iCourse kind of got the same thing going on. That
I mean,
all
we've
kinds of
shrunk a
overseas
lot.
members. Well,
Yeah,
still, but like
we've
it's
shrunk a lot, but we still got folks in a bunch of different countries. Yeah.
yeah. So like USPSA is just like technically is supposed to be the United States branch of IPSC, and I find that kind of compelling. I think it's neat that there is international competition, that we can go to like to a big event every couple of years and like fly the flag and do our best to beat other countries. And the
Yeah.
reason I think in particular that I think USPSA should stick with iron sights, at least for now, is that um, so the way the qualification process for that IPSC World Shoot works is that it's your percentage score based on like your percentage score out of the qualifying events, which are two IPSC nationals and two USPSA nationals. So
Okay.
to score well at the IPSC nationals, you have to be good with iron sights. But if you want to be competitive at USPSA nationals, you would need to put an optic on the gun. So then you're kind of training yourself with the other setting mechanism in a way that won't help you or won't even really represent how good you are with iron sights for
Sure.
the yeah for the
Okay.
team.
No,
Which yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, so you won. Let's see. So you won this one overall, or in your division, right? This last one in Phoenix. And so in let's see, at nationals, I'm trying to remember. I always look at the scores. Where are you standing in going to the world shoot this next time around?
Uh, Pretty comfortably.
Okay.
The win in Phoenix definitely helps, and I feel pretty good about the numbers the way they stand on the other two. I think, especially, I think I've kind of turned a corner over the winter as far as like building on some skills that have been in development for a while and putting them into use. And yeah, this last match and then the local matches I've been shooting too, they've all been going really well. Like up into the locally, I'm like up into the 80%, 85% range against like the open M's like around here.
And that ain't bad.
Yeah,
Oh, that's really good, man.
yeah.
Okay, well, so obviously your training's been paying off. You've been proving yourself at the competitive level against some really good shooters. So, with that in mind, what advice, if someone said, "Hey, Jay, I want to start shooting revolver. I want to try it out." And if you could go back and talk to yourself when you were getting started here, what advice would you give to that person?
Yeah. So I guess like the big thing I'd tell myself would be don't fear the double action. Like you get used to it. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
I did
It's a
at the last match. I don't know if you've ever done like the revolver shooter's trick, but like if you flex these muscles on my arm, like you can see there's a little bit of muscle there, and I flex the trigger finger, like this gigantic mass moving in the like out of the thing. It's like you build up like the muscles and the mental skills needed to make that double action pull work, and then it just becomes something you don't think about anymore. And it makes you really good at shooting single action too when you decide to go back to some auto stuff. So
yeah. No, I've definitely noticed a benefit to cross training, and I think the double action trigger. So I'd been shooting Berettas before I switched
yeah,
over to revolvers, so I had no fear of it. But even with that, I think it's just as big of an ordeal as you're going to make it. Like it
exactly. Yeah.
is. It is just as if you're a person who's like, man, I got to train this double action. Oh, this double action is throwing me off. Then it probably will. But
Hmm.
I mean, just even starting with the Beretta, it. And I will say that if you've once I cross trained to the Beretta from because before that I was shooting a Glock, just like at work and stuff,
Yeah.
and I think the double action trigger gave me a lot more confidence in the pull, and I learned I guess to process the sight picture a little differently. Like as I
Yeah.
was pulling the trigger to an extent, like I felt like I could even like on longer distance shots or single hand shooting, I could almost stage a little easier and
Hmm.
find that range in there. So I don't know. I got into where I really like it, and
Yeah. Well, I
hammer.
like to say the the single action pull is an event. The double action pull is a process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's a good way. Wait, say that one more time. Say it again.
Yeah. The single action pull is an event, and the double action pull is a process.
That's right. I like that a lot. That's really good. No, that's really
It
good.
is. It's like whenever I venture back into semi-autos just for a laugh now and then, I've got to like remind myself that uh, the sight picture really needs to be pretty much entirely there when I start pulling the trigger, because there's not the whole
Right.
duration of that double action pull to. Oh, I can fix that before the shot goes off, kind of thing.
Yeah. I did my first. So right before I started my club, I was like, I should at least see a real I-Core match before I, have my first club match or set up my first classifiers. So I drove to Phoenix and shot a match, and I expected to see similar accuracy to USPSA. And
Hmm.
every single one of those, they were just nailing it. And then first regional,
Oh
I
yeah,
went to the Southwest regional, the revolver shooters. It's like they know their ammo, and the double action trigger. I think kind of it helps develop a shorter tolerance for messing up that trigger pull.
yeah.
For disturbing the sights on the trigger pull. And so the level of accuracy and the standard of accuracy was just that was really impressed me as a new revolver shooter coming in. I mean, that first match, I should go back and look at the scores. I'm sure I was by far like the most points down or time
Mm.
down or whatever we call it. But but yeah, okay. So you would tell them don't fear the double action trigger. What would you recommend on gear and getting started? Would you point them towards a Ruger, or would you point them towards something else?
Well, the Rugers are just so hard to find right now. But I
Yeah.
guess like the 357s are kind of slowly coming back into availability.
Hmm.
And if you like Rugers, you like the aesthetic, and you think it's something that's going to get you to shoot more often, I'd say sure, go for one. I did a 2 hour video on how to tune up the triggers.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
that's
We'll link
yeah,
that. We'll link that in the description.
yeah.
Definitely.
So that's I think one of the best sources out there right now. Although I owe a lot to the like the I forget the like the Kuhnheiser, but there's a shop manual out there for Ruger double action revolvers, and it covers the old Security 6 series, but
Uh huh.
basically like the parts don't all look the same, but they all kind of do the same thing mechanically. So that it gave me a very good sense for how the gun actually works on the inside, but you can't really see because there's no side plate you can take off and like fiddle with things to watch how they interact.
Sure.
You've kind of got to build the model in your head and go from there.
I'm
Um,
sure there's like there's some small town or small time gunsmiths that some old dog brought in a Ruger Super GP 100 9 millimeter, and he went straight to your video to figure out how to do the trigger job.
yeah, I mean it's entirely possible. There aren't a lot of people out there who work on them. I know Dave Lasso does sometimes if you can get a hold of him, but he's not too busy. But and his actually are nicer than mine. I will say too. If you get a chance to pull the trigger on one of his,
Okay.
they're very nice. Yeah,
Well, good to
yeah. But
know.
like so, mine. I think I will say you give up maybe a little bit to like a nicely slicked up Smith and Wesson. I don't think his do. I think it's just different. I don't think they're any worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
like if you're okay with tinkering yourself and you like the Ruger aesthetic, buy a Ruger. If you want drop in stuff, I just bite the bullet and buy a Smith. I might have done that myself if I were going back in time, but well, maybe not. I don't know. It's tough to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hindsight's always 2020, and then there's too many variables. I feel like because I mean,
Yeah,
I think if somebody asked me, my first question would be like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And if I would have asked myself that, I wouldn't have even known. I was like, "Oh, I just thought this Smith and Wesson on sale was a good deal, and I could try a revolver." But I mean, generally speaking, the 8 shot is going to be Steel Challenge, USPSA, I-Core. You can shoot the most games with it.
yeah.
And I mean, I would say it should hypothetically it should be cheaper to shoot because it's 9 mil, right? But since they're so
Hypothetically,
ammo
yeah,
finicky, it's really not. And that's a whole other thing. Yeah, it just kind of makes it. Yeah, I feel like you almost have to have some idea of what you're going to do, or you just have to have a gun you really like. Because if you're shooting
yeah,
I-Core, we've got a home for every single revolver. I mean, you could shoot a J frame, you're just not going to be competitive at all. But I mean, we have a home for classic limited six, and now we've got our big six, and Snubby's been around for a while. Open limited, we've got a home for it. We had a guy come out. His granddad had left him a nickel plated. I want to say it was a 6.8 or 586, and so like an L frame Smith, and it was nice. It was clean, and he had never done any competition shooting. He just wanted to shoot his revolver. Came out, we got him set up. He was carrying it in like a fanny pack thing on his chest. I was like, "Well, you got to use my holster." With a cigarette in his mouth, he hit it with a speed loader, and he flicked it closed. And I was like, "All right, he is the only guy that would do that to this revolver." Man, it was something else. But yeah, I would love to see more people shooting, and I do think revolver is a little bit cost prohibitive to start, and
yeah,
it is it's a tinkering division. You could win a national title with factory ammo and a stock gun in some divisions and in some sports within the shooting world, right? Revolver
mhm,
is not one of those. I don't think. Like you've kind of got to be willing to tinker with it. You got to be willing to play with it. You have to keep a screwdriver handy. At least with my revolvers, I feel like those screws are always trying to come out like every range session. You got to keep your cylinder tightened up just right, and ammo is always a consideration. It's definitely a tinkering division, and depending on what sport you're playing, I'd say it's a thinking division because
mhm,
it's and since production moved up to 15 rounds, a couple of the locals seemed almost more revolver friendly. I know that sounds kind of odd, but instead of like stand here and dump eight and stand there and dump eight and then run over here and dump eight, it's kind of, and I don't know if that's because of production. I don't know why, but like single stack is a thinking man's game. I feel like very much so because you've got major is still competitive, minor is very competitive, and depending on what you're doing, but revolver, I feel like there's a lot of skill and you got to want to tinker. There's like revolver
yeah.
specific skill to it. So
I definitely agree that revolver is the most specialist of the handgun divisions and might be the most specialist of the USPSA divisions altogether, counting PCC.
yeah,
Like I don't really shoot PC. They've got a lot of different stuff going on there, but revolver is like almost as different, if not more.
yeah. No, the way you shoot, the stuff you got to do to prepare for a match, it's time consuming, and you got to be interested in it. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, if you, I know the first time I reconsidered revolver was when I had to load up all the moon clips for a major the night before. It's like, and there's tools that make it go faster. Don't get me wrong, but it did make me
but
go, man, this is a
it's
labor of love, you know?
it's still not like a great not a great experience. So like flying to matches, that's been a relatively new experience for me. Like the first one I flew to was the IRC, pardon me, in 2022, and both then and out to IPSC, like you can't fly with loaded moon clips. So I've got to
Interesting. Yeah.
put all my ammo from like my storage tubs at home into boxes like the airlines require. Then I've got to go to the match, and then the night before take them from the boxes and put them onto moon clips. Then after the match, I've got to take all the ammo and all the empties off of the moon clips and put them back into the boxes to fly back home with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it wouldn't be an issue if you were shooting PCC or something else. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
like even then, I guess it's easier to unload a PCC magazine into into the ammo box too. But with
I would
the
say
moon
so.
clip,
Yeah.
Yeah, like the moon clips, like all the tools, you're like leveling them off, pointing them like kind of the wrong direction too. So you gotta like take the ammo off, dump it into your hand, put it into the box one by one, and then repeat like 700 times.
Yeah, no, it's a labor
Yeah.
of love. Revolver definitely has its own needs. But you did mention IRC. It's up in your side of the country this year. Do you think you'll be able to make it out?
Oh, absolutely. It's on the weekend of my birthday. I'm gonna be there anyway.
Well, how about that? Okay, so limited, I assume, will be your division since that's what
Yes.
you're going to be. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well,
So
there
I'm.
should be some
I'm
good competition.
oh yeah. McGinty's out this way too, so he usually shoots limited as well.
Okay, yeah, that's another name I always see at the top. So that ought to be good. Cool.
Yeah. So he's another one of the Team Ruger guys. And so like he and Olhaso, they both live out in eastern Pennsylvania or somewhere in that vicinity. And I'm going to see them at the East Coast Regional coming up in, I guess, about a month and a half from now.
Okay.
But it's like I'm definitely shooting limited at the IRC because, well, A, it's kind of close to USPSA Nationals, and B, um, I want to be tuned up on iron sights kind of going into the winter into 2025.
For
But for the
sure.
East Coast Regional, last year, I shot ICOR open for that, and I'm going to do that again this year.
Okay. Okay.
I like the dot now and then. But.
I've been trying to do dot this year, and it is a struggle for me because I spent so much time on irons, and like my classifier scores with irons are significantly better than open. It's just something I got to get used to. Good on you for switching back and forth, though. And do you have a Ruger that's set up for an optic then?
Yeah, so actually, I had last year I shot one of my 9mm in open, but this year I'm going to set up both of the 357s. I'll shoot 38 short Colt out of them, and those will be my open revolvers. They won't have ports or comps, but they'll be good enough.
I mean, it's 120 power factor. I have my open guns ported for ICOR, but I can't tell a difference between that and just my regular 920. It's 120 power factor with like things
Big
like
heavy bullets
160 or 165 grain. There's nothing coming out of there. It shoots like, it almost feels like a rimfire. It is just nothing out of that thing, especially if you got a little heavier frame. And I think the Ruger, I mean, it feels like it's got a little weight to it, or at least it's balanced more to the rear.
Yeah,
so,
like 46 ounces or so, I think, in total. Some of that, they don't have the Smiths have the titanium cylinder, and the Rugers are just still plain old steel. So
yeah.
that'll pull the weight back from the muzzle some.
Yeah. So I mean, that'll be fun. I wish I could make it. That'd be cool to see everybody shooting out there. It's a little bit of a haul.
Yeah, it is a distance from down there. I do like. I always enjoy ICOR matches when I get to go to them, especially like the ICOR majors, because coming from USPSA, which is kind of my main game, USPSA always feels like it's such serious business. We've got to have all of our stages measured down to the millimeter and so forth. And ICOR is like a little bit more willing to let its hair down.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, like last year at the East Coast Regional, there was a stage where there were targets painted red and blue in the stage, like throughout the stage. And before you made ready, you would go and flip over a card on a table near the
like
near
one
the
gun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like you get the I've got to shoot all the blue targets first, and I've got to go back to the stage and shoot all the red targets, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was cool.
ICOR in there, when you go and see like the ICOR About Us, they talk about how they were trying to combine or make a home for revolvers, taking elements from, Bianchi and Steel Challenge and IPSC and all these others. And regionals are fun. I love running guns. I like that in ICOR, we hypothetically, like traditionally we mix it up. We have a bunch of different types of stages. You'll see an all steel stage. You'll see some big running guns. Standard stage are still pretty big. I know I like going to the regionals because I get to see some really cool revolvers that like people just don't customize them like that anymore. And I was talking to this one cat out there. He's an older guy. I guess we'd call him a grand super senior or something. And he was lamenting to me. He's like, man, I was talking to my grandsons. I was asking them what gun of mine they wanted when I passed, and they wanted the Glocks. They didn't want any of my revolvers. And he's got some of the coolest custom revolver barrels, like I mean, just they're purely for aesthetics. Like some
Yeah,
really neat stuff out there, and it's just you just don't see it as much anymore. And I don't know. That's one of the things I like about regionals, just seeing some of the wild stuff out there. Some of these guys have been in the game, 30 years,
yeah,
and like gunsmiths and customizers have come and gone, but some of these builds are still living on, doing some pretty cool stuff. But we're about halfway through our time. One thing I really want to talk to you about, because you've made tremendous progress, because you started Revolver about the same time I did, and one of my friends, he found your channel and sent me a video, and it was early on. It's probably like what it would have had to be at least 2 years ago, maybe three,
yeah.
and you've taken off since then, obviously, and like no more. I think that video you're having a lot of light strike issues. Obviously, you've overcome that. I feel like any revolver shooter worth their salt has had light strike
Oh yeah,
issues to work
absolutely.
through.
It's like
That's like the crucible to see if you really want to do revolver.
well, the baptism by fire or by not fire, as the case may be.
Yeah, and it's always at the worst time. There's never a good time for it. But what would you say could you tell us about your training style? What have you done? Do you have a systematic approach to how you've improved and gotten this far in a relatively short period of time?
Yeah. Well, I credit a lot of that to Steve Anderson on like the methods and like techniques things. So training for me is ultimately just about grinding out the reps and the way to make the most of grinding out the reps. That's kind of like out of any episode of the Anderson shooting podcast, like he'll touch on how best how to turn those reps into skill you can count on subconsciously. And that's kind of been the whole thing for me. Like there are, I say there have been thousands of hours in my reloads. I'm not sure it's actually quite thousands, but it's definitely like many hundreds. And I don't know, like 50,000 reps in practice, maybe more. It's uh, like for a long time getting to that point, the point where I can astonish people at shoot offs.
It's quite a high bar. You make it sound like it's not much, but it's a high bar.
Well, it's there's a lot of time in that, and so like I kind of approach other skills the same way. You do them enough, you kind of set yourself measurable benchmarks, and then you surpass those benchmarks and move the benchmarks up.
So long obedience with measurable benchmarks. Is that how you would say that
Yeah,
you
I'd say
got where you
that's
are?
pretty much what I do. Yeah.
Okay. So do you have are you a daily dry fire guy? Are you doing it 3 days a week? Do you not dry fire anymore now that you've kind of developed that base skill? Tell me about that.
I'd say probably like even now 90% of my training's in dry fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daily? Are you
Pretty
two-time?
much daily.
Okay.
So like right now I'm kind of gearing up to do some video coverage of the USPSA Area 8 match. So I'm down to
Yeah.
like 3 times a week or so for dry fire, just as I'm the none of the other top revolver talents around here are signed up for Area 8 right now, so I don't need to I don't need to be super practiced up to put in a winning performance for that match.
So you're saying there's a chance. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're out there listening, I'm not going to be at my utter sharpest peak. I'm still going to be pretty good though. That's just the baseline now.
Yeah. Okay. So when you dry fire, do you have a specific, like right now for the next week, do you have something specific you're working on? Or is it kind of like, I haven't done weekend in a while. Like, how are you approaching your dry fire?
I keep like a little training log, and I kind of try and visit all the areas of the sport on a fairly regular basis. So today I was working some shooting while moving and some entry and exit into low ports. Just
Okay.
like the low ports in particular, that was a thing that over the past couple of matches I've noticed that like there's some low hanging fruit there. So I can, if I grind it for a while, I'll see some advantage there. And so like low ports are one of those where they don't come up a ton compared to like reloads while moving. But it's like even on days when I'm working something else, like the reloads while moving will end up taking up a lot of the session, just because I'm sure I'll see those every match, whereas a low port's kind of a maybe thing.
Yeah. I mean, some of those things, like I know I put a lot of time and effort into shooting single hand. And I think every regional I've been to but one, I won the classifier uh, at those matches, and I think a lot of it is just because I spent a lot of time because I said, this doesn't come up all the time, but when it does, there's a lot of people that are scared of it, and it
Yeah,
just seems like a place where mistakes are easy to make, but it gives me a chance to make up some time. And like you're saying with low ports, I think that makes perfect sense. Like when it
exactly. Yeah,
does come up, if you've practiced it and the other guy really hasn't, I mean,
yeah,
definitive advantage.
exactly. It
So
was like I say very very same thing with one-handed shooting. That's another thing that Anderson hits on a lot. Like it's being the best at shooting one head is like a pretty easy thing to do just because nobody else puts a lot of time into it. So like you
right,
don't need to invest your entire life in being a strong hand weak hand shooter to be the best strong hand weak hand shooter to match. And that's just free points or free time depending on the sport you're shooting. Uh,
yeah,
like the objective, like none of us have infinite time to put into training, and some of us don't have even like a huge amount. So the aim is to kind of know uh, what you need to do to like what you can make up ground on the easiest, and then work on that, and then that'll pay off the quickest.
yeah, that's fair to say. So okay, so new shooter, you've got your dry fire stuff. What's the first thing you think they should be working on?
Well, so once they're comfortable with the actual trigger pulling, I think it goes straight to reloads.
I'm
I
with
mean,
you. I'd say accuracy, then reloads. If you can do
yep,
those two things, the rest is a shooting, any other shooting sport.
yep.
So good deal. Well, when you do go and do live fire, and you're doing training, what would that look like typically? I'm assuming you still have your notebook and you're going through there. Is there a
Yeah.
certain like prop or target array that you're using a lot?
So I most of my practice happens at a different range, not the one where I run a match, but one that happens to be about 10 minutes away from my office. So
Uh,
my mornings once or twice a week will look like, well, I'll wake up an hour early and I'll go and shoot for an hour before work. And so what I do there, it's usually stuff that I can set up pretty quickly. Um, so there will be movement. There will be almost always like opening up with groups just to make sure the guns are still zeroed, and like to kind of get myself in the mental space where like I know what the most accurate shot I'm going to need to fire feels like, and then from there it's just again picking something that may have shown up recently that I want to work on more, or working on skills that I think will come up. Actually, I don't do a lot of reloading practice in live fire. I leave that for matches and dry fire because the nice thing about click reload click is that you don't need any like there's no need for a bang in there to like to do the like to rehearse the whole process.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I don't have any drills in my book that require a reload because I don't see the value in it in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these drills that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if I've got like something two reload two or two reload four or four reload two, and I've got the end of a moon clip left, I'll do it with that because that's also good practice for another revolver skill, which is you need to go one for one on this array.
yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
real thing. There was a match at the South Regional, and it was a plate rack and a paper target.
Yep.
And I can't tell you how many times I was like, well, is because I got an 8-shot gun. As long as I hit every single plate, I'll be fine. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no problem. Missed the sixth one.
Yep.
And so I had to do a standing reload. That I'm assuming other limited shooters didn't, but or open shooters. But yeah, no, going one for one, I think, is a huge thing with the revolver because it does add. I mean, if you're good under pressure in a match, I think a 2.5 second reload, a 2 second reload is pretty good. Like that's going
Yeah.
to be hard to beat, um, especially match conditions. And so that one shot end up costing you no less than 2 seconds. And if it was one you missed, it's probably not going to be a 2 second reload because you're going to have to take some time to aim at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that'll definitely get you. So any other like training tips or something like that before it might go well into my next question. So when you were starting out, I assume just based on a couple of the videos that I've watched that one of your first goals was to grandmaster Revo. Is that correct?
It wasn't. Maybe it was like kind of turned into one of my first goals once I realized I could, like, if I put the work in, I could get there. At the very beginning, I was more or less in it to have fun. Like I got my RO certificate in 2020 or so as well, and maybe 2020. It might have been. I don't recall if it was 2020 or 2021, but I worked a major match and thought, well, maybe this is going to be like what my shooting career looks like. I'll go around and shoot matches on staff day and then work them so I don't have to pay for them. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then like once the dry fire started kicking in and the classifier score started going up, and I thought, well, maybe there's something to like chasing classification here a bit. And yeah, that's what after a little bit, that's where I got to. That's where I got to as far as goals go.
Yeah. I mean, I needed something to point at, at least for a while. Cause I mean, that was a goal. Once I started, was, hey, I might actually enjoy this revolver thing. I might stick with it. That was one of the first things. I just needed something to point at, and I wasn't going to go to nationals. I didn't have the time or work schedule that would have allowed for much travel. And so I was like, well, I'll just see how high I can get in the classification. And then by the time I started making progress, I quit shooting USPSA for about a year and a half. And then I finally came back, and my first one back in a year and a half, I got 100 on it. But I needed something to aim at, and classifiers seem to be an objective point of measure, and in some capacity. Sure, yeah. So what would you, any range, like what were the tips, or what would you say got you from that B class revolver shooter to GM? Is there something particular that you think really made the gap, or was it just the consistency?
Like some of it, I think a little bit of both, maybe. Classifiers on average test your gun handling skills a lot more strongly than, say, running around stages.
Sure.
And even the newer USPSA classifiers that have more running around, they still test your your gun handling pretty strongly because they're much shorter stages. There's more time bound up in the draw and in the reload if you need them, which you probably will because it's revolver.
Yeah.
And yeah, more of the overall stage time is in there just because they're pretty short stages to begin with. So like really drilling those, really getting the really being the best trigger puller you can be. I think that's if chasing classification is the goal, that's I think the best way to do it.
Okay. So on that note, how much ammo, and you said you do mostly dry fire. I get that. How much ammo is a top level revolver shooter going through, say, on a monthly basis when you're getting ready for matches?
Getting ready for a big match.
Yeah.
Well, about maybe like 200 to 300 rounds of live fire on like a normal week, and then twice that in the 2 weeks or so leading up to a match. So there's 400 plus 800, about 1,200, and then I'll usually shoot a local or two. So call it like, I don't know, 1,200 to 1,500 rounds, I guess. And I'm very light on the live fire for anyone at the top levels of any division. A lot of people go a lot heavier than that.
It seems like it kind of since I've been working on this, it seems like it kind of varies. You have people that are putting tremendous amount of ammo through their gun leading up to said event, and then you have like this other faction of people that really aren't doing anything that crazy leading up to it. And those people seem to have a very systematic approach to individual skills. That's kind of one thing I'm noticing is like the guy, and not that the guys who shoot a lot don't. And I think some of that's accessibility. Like the range where we hold our match is at least, if there's no traffic and it's 6 a.m. on a Saturday, it takes me about an hour and a half to get there. If there's traffic, it's 2 hours. So like if it was necessary for me to shoot, 4,000 rounds a month to be successful at the next regional, then there's just, I couldn't get to the range enough to make it happen. And so I know that there's plenty of people who make it happen without, and then there's some folks that have the access, or like I think most people would love to have a range, say, in their backyard. It'd just be so easy. And I feel like the potential is there, but you see these guys who really don't have that kind of access getting really high up there, making some, awesome achievements. But, okay, well, that's interesting. I appreciate that. One of my last questions here for you, where do you see the revolver sport going? And I'll preface that with, I'm in ICOR. I'm a regional series director, and I've been talking to a lot of folks. and it I don't think we're pulling in as many new people as we need to. And so I'm seeing that's really part of that's the reason I'm doing any of the social media stuff. Prior to any of this revolver life, I had no real social media presence. I didn't care about it. Didn't matter to me. I'm just trying to grow the sport. And
Yeah.
that so as far as I see it, I think the market looks good. There's some good revolvers out there. There, Taurus, Ruger, and Smith are all producing, are about to be producing a very competitive product. It's a little expensive, but I mean, how many people bought 92X performances? Those weren't cheap either,
Yeah.
So I don't think people are afraid of spending money on guns. They just kind of got to see the value in it, in the fun of the sport. So with that in mind, where do you see the revolver sports in the future, 5 years from now?
That's an interesting one as far as questions go. So I certainly hope they continue to attract the occasional new shooter, somebody like me who bounces around between semi-autos without really finding a home, and then says, "Oh, revolvers. That's going to be fun." Uh, and yeah, like I think there's going to be kind of like a baseline number of those folks anyway. Uh, maybe not like tremendous numbers of them, like maybe not numbers even to the point of growth, but I think at this point probably numbers, probably maintenance numbers, and that's kind of been borne out, I think, by USPSA numbers over the past 5 to 10 years or so.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, since the heyday of the division, participation's gone down somewhat, but it has been pretty steady lately. It's one of the more consistent of the super specialty low cap divisions at this point.
Yeah.
Production and single stacks still are kind of like shedding members now and then. Revolver's pretty consistently just like about 1% of the scores submitted in USPSA matches are revolver scores, pretty reliably now.
Yeah.
Now growth is definitely good, and I think as much as I think that the right choice for USPSA revolver is iron sights, I think open would rather dots would bring some people in. I know folks who have said they would give it a try at least if they could do that. And some of that, like if we had iCore around here, that would be a great chance for them to put the money where the mouth is, I guess. But
Yeah.
if failing that, yeah, I mean, I have high hopes, I guess, for what Taurus is doing. A presumably cheaper revolver than the $1,200 to $1,500 you're going to spend on a Smith or Ruger before it goes to a gunsmith. That's a big investment, and something a little bit more Taurus priced will make it, I think, easier to say, hey, you should, if you want to shoot revolver, here's a good entry level option. It'll get the job done for sure, and it will not force you to spend four figures in a gun you're not totally sure about.
Yeah. I've got high hopes for it. I think Taurus may be the savior of the revolver sports in the end. Because I mean,
Yeah,
like Smiths are great. I have a lot of Smiths. I'm a Ruger fanboy. I enjoy them, but it is tough to kind of pitch somebody. They're like, oh man, I'll come out and shoot revolver. What do I need? And it's like, well, all you need is this $1,400 revolver. You're going to need to get the cylinder chamfered. That's going to be another $200, and then you're going to need to do. And by the time they get all the equipment, and then at $8 a moon clip, and someone's going to step on them anyways, it
yeah,
really starts to get like, man, this is becoming an investment. And I mean, they say the classic, like your speed loader division, is the entry point, but kind of like carry optics or limited optics. I think that's an entry point for a lot of people because they liked a certain gun, you know.
Mhm.
So like, yeah, it would have been cheaper for people to start off in production, but I haven't met a guy who started off in production in like 4 years. I
Yeah,
feel like everybody goes straight into carry optics or limited optics, and then they go, and it's as soon as they get to carry optics, they go, oh man, well I'd like to have a bigger magazine, well I'd like to have a magwell, and then they just end up in limited optics anyways. So I think we
yeah.
kind of run into some of the same thing when we go, well, classic is our entry division, and it's like, well, but nobody wants to shoot except for that one guy. Nobody wants to shoot their granddad's revolver in a competition first time out. They want
Yeah.
to be competitive, even if
But
their
I think
skills aren't there, they want the competitive equipment. And I think the Taurus might be a real answer to that.
absolutely. I think that like the nice thing about classic is that kind of like production, it gives like there's an opportunity there for the gun that you have in the back of the safe to be competitive. if you need if you're in the USPSA situation where 6 round major is almost never like a sensible thing to shoot, you're
Yeah.
kind of out of luck.
Yeah.
Like you go in and you're at a massive disadvantage. Whereas at least in classic, or I guess even like limited six to some degree, showing up with a 6 gun and the ammunition feeding device is appropriate there too. You can turn up at a match and you won't feel like you're going to get bodied by the guy with the the 8 rounds and the compensator and the red dot and such. Even if you're in the same match, at least like I'm not shooting directly against him. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's one thing ICOR does really well is that the stages are typically very 6-shot friendly. And,
Yep.
and that I actually shot IDPA for the first time late last year. And I was really surprised at how friendly, like revolver friendly the stages were.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not something I've done a lot of, but I've enjoyed what I've done just because, you show up to a match and I don't know the IDPA rules that well, but their stages are super friendly and ICOR has got super friendly revolver rules. So,
Yep.
yeah, well, on that note, Jay, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the time. Is there anything you want to plug? Anywhere people can find you that you'd like to put out there?
A couple actually. So I am on Instagram at J of Mars, J_of_Mars. That's where most of my video goes up nowadays. I don't put as much on YouTube as I used to, on the basis that I don't want to tell people how to beat me. So
Fair.
I can be a little bit more parsimonious with what I share on Instagram while still kind of like getting some revolver content out there, which is nice. I make moon clip carriers. Those are well, you can find those in the link tree from Instagram or at my website, which is generico.ltd. And I'm also now on Patreon for all the shooting sports analysis I do at patreon.com/shooting sports analyst. And one of the things actually I want to do and hope to be able to do toward the end of this year is bring some of that ELO rating magic from USPSA over into other sports. And I'm going to do one for ICOR too, even though I probably shoot at least as much IDPA as I do ICOR. Well, maybe not at least, but like comparable amounts, but I like ICOR more. So I'm going to do it for ICOR first.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I saw on the cover, I think you're wearing an ICOR hat, and I was like,
I
"That's
am.
our
Yep.
guy. That's our guy right there."
That classic brown hat.
Yeah.
I wear
Awesome,
that
man.
to a lot of matches. Actually, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, it's
So,
my go-to. It started a lot of conversations. Like I was at the
yeah,
airport and a guy was talking to me about it a couple weeks ago, and
it's
it's a conversation starter for sure. So
it's maybe a little bit less necessary at matches because the fact that I'm wearing a revolver on my belt
yeah,
already says I like revolvers. But
yeah, it's a hint. No, I got you.
yeah,
All right, man. Well, hey, this has been great. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll talk again in the future like this. I appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
thanks for having me on.